just were always kind of lied to about what savings is. And when you think about it, it's like, no, it's really just a slow debasement of your money. It's a slow theft. People think they have money when really all they have, because they legally have to earn in it and pay taxes in it, is a currency. I think the adoption that matters, for why Bitcoin was created and what it can do for people, I think that comes with pain, unfortunately. And we are seeing globally a lot more pain. It's a savings technology. So the dollars you already know about, take them and save them in a better way. Real estate just has so much risk, and you don't really own it. Your landlord is really the county in which you live in, because they are collecting property taxes. The biggest misconception is...
Welcome back to the show. Today we are joined by the author of Proof of Money, Terence Michael. Terence, thanks for joining. To start with, I have two quick fire questions before we get into the episode. So to start with, if you had to simplify Bitcoin for a complete beginner or stranger in one sentence, what would you say?
It's a savings technology. So the dollars you already know about, take them and save them in a better way.
And the second question is, what's one truth about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood?
That no one else can steal from you or manipulate you, that you can be responsible for your own future. And so as long as you know how to keep a secret and you're willing to be responsible, you will have the best chance at a future that no government or third party can take away from you.
Powerful. And I've got a load of questions for you based on your background, where you're at now, and what's on your mind. What I'm interested in, and I'm sure the audience will be before I ask questions, is if you can give us a bit of an overview of your journey to this point through real estate, Bitcoin, Hollywood, all of these things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've talked about it on a lot of podcasts, so I'll give you the short version, and if you want to jump into anything, it's fine. So Hollywood is my main vocation, and after doing lots of movies and lots of TV shows, but also working in an industry that has lots of hiatuses and breaks and is all dependent on if you can sell something or set something up, I needed to have a way to save the money that I was making, and real estate made the most sense to me. And also I was preconditioned and grew up in a world where real estate sounded like it was the smart, responsible thing to do. You're getting older, that's what you do. So I turned to real estate, even though I had no skills in it. But I ended up actually being pretty good in it, and I actually liked it at first. It just started to add a lot of friction and a lot of headache and a lot of stress once I got deeper and deeper into it. Turned it into several businesses, and it sort of became a whole second full-time job. So I would stop doing Hollywood to do real estate, and then I would stop doing real estate to do Hollywood, and it was back and forth. So it was nice that I had those both. But once I discovered Bitcoin, and I was doing both of those when I discovered Bitcoin, I realized that there was a way better way. So it would actually allow me to say no more, to say yes to the projects I wanted to do, and not just to certain TV shows that I didn't care about, but I had to convince myself I was excited about, or buying some out-of-state property that I never was really going to enjoy, never get to stay at. So really that real estate that I thought was cool, to have a place in Nashville or Austin or some of the many places I've had real estate, it just sounded fun. It was kind of like a flex or a brag, because when am I going to get to use it? In which case it's really just a number on a balance sheet. I just would do better having a stock and being passive. And so when Bitcoin came along, and I thought, oh, this could be like a stock, but now I don't have to put all my trust in something with counterparty risk due to reputation, or due to, Elon Musk having an affair or whatever. I could just save, which is kind of what we always wanted to do. We just were always kind of lied to about what savings is. And when you think about it, it's like, no, it's really just a slow debasement of your money. It's a slow theft. It's just like, what's the slowest way I can lose? And they call that savings, which, as you know, is just a loan to the bank. So that's my brief, quick journey. I think the storytelling skills that I learned for decades in Hollywood has helped me in Bitcoin. because one of my favorite things to do in Bitcoin is to educate and to teach. And oftentimes that means I'm using lots of simple analogies. But, in Hollywood, you get beat over the head over and over and over. Make this dumber. The audience isn't going to understand it. Make it more simple. Repeat it again. Repeat it again. And so I just try to dumb down things as much as I can.
I think that's a superpower in itself. That's initially what attracted me to your content, is that it's portrayed in a way that can be easily understandable in a world that likes to be overcomplicated, I think, which is what I'm trying to do with this channel as well, is to help people wrap their head around complex or made to be complex ideas in a more simple way. So with that being said, that's obviously led you to writing a book, Proof of Money. But before we dive into that, in your view, what's the biggest misconception that people have about money before they even find out what Bitcoin is?
The biggest misconception is that people think they have money when really all they have, because they legally have to earn in it and pay taxes in it, is a currency. That what they really have are receipts. They have IOUs. And the problem is they've got a valet check, but the car has been stolen from them. They can't turn it in for the car anymore. They have a coat check, at the club, and they can't go and get their coat to keep them warm anymore. And so the big psyop is that these receipts, this valet ticket that you have, that's the value of the car. You don't need to drive anywhere. Just take that valet ticket and take little pieces of it to go eat and pay your rent and whatnot. And so since we don't really have money, the whole idea is how, what is money? What are the characteristics of money? And what's the best way that can manifest? And the whole reason why I titled my book Proof of Money is because as I started to learn about Bitcoin, I realized technically we've never had money throughout history. No one has ever had money. Everything has just been what we could find, what we could dig up, what we could take a feather off of a back, picking up tobacco out of a field. Everything was just the best that we could do. Everything was just a surrogate. And, humans didn't know any better. It's just like, okay, this will be the money. But then it always got corrupted somehow, and usually by some kind of centralized entity. And so finally, the technology existed once we entered the digital age, where someone could say, or I should say several people over 50 to 60 years said, we can make better money. And so there were a lot of attempts at that until all the pieces were put together, and Satoshi kind of like cooked all those ingredients together and added a couple of his own spices.
I still think, or I know that money is massively misunderstood by the majority of people. So from your perspective, with what Bitcoin does provide as better money than the fiat currencies that we have access to now, for someone listening that perhaps hasn't thought these things through, why is Bitcoin a better money than the fiat currencies that we're operating with today?
Well, for a couple of main big reasons that, all Bitcoiners really know. And for one, it's just that if the ultimate trade of money is with your future self, that you are sending money to yourself in time, in the future, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, you want to make sure it gets there, first of all. And next, you want to make sure that it carries the purchasing power of why you're saving in the first place. Because if I want to be incentivized to paint a barn for 10 hours and not take that 10 hours of work and just buy all my food, pay all my bills, and there's some extra, and then just buy more TVs and clothes and shoes and headphones and things that I don't need, if I want to be incentivized to hang on to that, then I need to know that it's going to be there when I'm sending it to my future self. And if when it gets there, it's only there nominally, but it's not getting me those same headphones, if it's not getting me that same TV and stuff, well, then it really isn't money. Because if the definition of money is to be a store of value, that's the one thing that we've been lied to about with other money systems. So I think that's the big idea, is that we can store the purchasing power, our future spending ability, and two, we can send it to ourselves. And we have to think about, where we live. Where you live and where I live may not be a problem, but pretend there is sort of a birth lottery and you don't know where you're going to end up, what country, what regime, what jurisdiction, and you have to choose a money before you know where you're going to end up. Like, are you going to say, okay, well, I'll just choose the fiat currency wherever I end up? Great. You're going to have the Turkish lira, the Argentine peso. It's like, I would choose Bitcoin because I don't know where I'm going to end up. It's like, so Bitcoin supersedes all of that. It doesn't see any lines drawn in sand. So it's just, when you think about what Bitcoin is, as simple as it is, it's like, wow, why didn't we do this earlier? But, I think the technology just didn't exist.
And one thing that you've just mentioned there around Bitcoin being a store of value, but also a medium of exchange, I think from my perspective anyway, this message is getting blurred a lot at the moment. When I was at Bitcoin Mina, there's a massive emphasis on store of value, and even a lot of the big vocal voices in the Bitcoin space at the moment are kind of almost glossing over the medium of exchange side of Bitcoin through IBIT, through ETFs and this kind of thing, where it can't be a medium of exchange because you don't own the money. So I know you talk a lot about security and the scarcity of Bitcoin. What do you think from the conversations you're having that people are missing with regards to this piece?
To medium of exchange?
Yeah, and custodying their Bitcoin.
Yeah, so all Bitcoin really is. A lot of these are sort of like nuance, but really you can think of Bitcoin only as a medium of exchange and nothing else, right? When we say store value, it really is just a medium of exchange through time, right? Like, again, sending to your future self, that makes it a storage of value, but it's really you're exchanging with your future self. And then a medium of exchange through space, where you are now and how far distance-wise you can send it, especially in a digital world, is the medium of exchange that we think of. And it's 100% a medium of exchange because it is a medium that I use as an exchange. I live on a Bitcoin standard. Other people live on a Bitcoin standard. Other people use it. Just because it isn't prevalent yet just means that we're early, and all of those tools are being built out. If you look at any money system, throughout history, it's all, it wasn't on day one people accepted, seashells or feather or hides or clams or whatever. It took time for people to say, first of all, oh, this has value, and I agree it has value. So if I agree it has value, right, you and I will exchange, whatever. We'll exchange this pen if we both agree that it has value, but we won't until you do, even though I do as well. Real estate is a medium of exchange. It's a terrible medium of exchange because if I take off a wall, I'm, lessening the whole of the house, and the house will, deteriorate, and houses also aren't fungible. But I could take a door off of my house and hand it to someone in exchange for something. So it really is a medium of exchange. It's a little bit of semantics. I do think that, again, like answering your first question when we started out, because normies confuse money and currency, they think it's the same thing. And them not seeing Bitcoin priced at Starbucks or their grocery store or their gym, that causes a big problem. And that's something that a lot of critics say. They go, oh, well, Bitcoin's not money. Where can I use it? Where can I spend it? And it's like, well, yeah, it's today not a currency for you, but it's 100% money. Would you not call gold money, as people have for 6,000 years? I think people would call gold money. But I can't go to the grocery store or to the gym or to the coffee shop with my gold. So I think it just takes some reframing with people and teaching them what money is. Like, I always like to start off with asking people, I'm like, number one, how do you save? And when you ask them that question, and they sit there and they think, and they're like, I don't know, I have some money here in the bank, or I buy a few stocks on Robinhood. And I was like, great, how's that going for you? And are you not taking risk on the stocks over here? And how much are you making on? Anyways, you can get to the bottom of a conversation with them just asking questions, and you find out that they realize that they aren't saving. There is no savings. And then when you say, well, what characteristics should savings have? And then we can go through the characteristics that you and I know about money, about it being portable and divisible and fungible and permissionless and non-confiscatable and saleable and all these things. And they can't disagree. And even if they don't come up with them, you could say, here's 7 characteristics of what money, forget about Bitcoin, should be. Would you not agree that these are, no one will deny that it should be durable, that it should be portable, right? That I could slice it and it should be divisible. So once you get to those, you're like, great, so let's break down what money can do that best. And it's so simple and so basic, and I think that's probably why every Bitcoin book starts off with those characteristics. The article that I read by Vijay Boyapati back in the day, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, it was so obvious, and it broke it down. And lots of gold bugs know this. They've been studying it way before us Bitcoiners, but I'm not a gold bug. I had no idea what sound money was. And when I saw those, just that little chart, that little table of the characteristics, I thought, oh, wow, I get it. Like, I can't deny the value of Bitcoin when I see that it meets these characteristics. So I think that's what people miss. They confuse money and currency, and then they don't know what money is.
Yeah, there's a lot of education to be done in that space. So that's really interesting. So are you saying from that, my understanding is that even when you were in real estate looking to store your value, you didn't fully understand what Bitcoin was. It just led you to real estate because that's all that you had a perception of.
Yeah, that's right. Because again, in normie land, and even when you first discover Bitcoin, until you go deep, 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 you just are thinking still in your own fiat currency. So I'm just thinking in dollars. And for me, real estate was like, oh, can I flip this house and make more dollars? Can I rent that and make some dollars? Can I create an Airbnb here and have dollars? I'll rent out to students, have dollars, It was always about dollars. It was a big scorecard. How do I get more dollars? And when I first found Bitcoin, yeah, it's just a trade to get more dollars. Oh, it's going to go up. I'll sell it and get more dollars. It's not until you really, really learn that Bitcoin isn't meant to give you more dollars. Bitcoin is just the money. I am leaving and I'm going to Bitcoin land, and I just want Bitcoin land tokens. And I will buy things in Bitcoin land tokens. And so here's the hard part that's hard for people, but what helps them get there is that, when you think about, let's say you travel to England, and so say you're going to move to England, and it's like, okay, now your new money is going to be the pound. And you have to start looking at things in pounds, and you start, and for me, I have to do a conversion. Oh, wait, how many dollars are a pound? And, oh, wait, that says 15 pounds. Wait, is that less or more than $15? And until you figure it out, you're using an app maybe. Once you start to figure it out, you price everything in that. And so, like for me, it took a while, but, now I just price things in satoshis. And so I see things in satoshis. And so it helps me think, first of all, like, oh, okay, here's, let's say 100,000 satoshis. Something costs 100,000 satoshis. Well, if that's $100, my brain is like, that's $100. But 100,000, because the unit price is so high, I'll be like, oh, wait, do I really need that? Do I really want to spend 100,000 satoshis on that thing? Maybe I don't really need that thing. We Bitcoiners know this, but the dollar doesn't incentivize us to save, really. It encourages us to spend. It encourages us to gamble. But Bitcoin encourages us to save, to build, to plan, and to create. And I think if people start thinking in satoshis, it will really, really help them, because suddenly, a million satoshis, $1,000 sounds like a lot. Like a million satoshis will be worth a lot someday. So anyways, for me, I feel like if I'm going to Bitcoin land and I'm using Bitcoin land's units, I should start looking at everything in Bitcoin land money, and it will encourage me to spend less, and it will encourage me to seek quality.
That's so cool, Terence. So part of what you said there is that you live on a Bitcoin standard and Bitcoin is money, which I fully agree. I asked Jeff Booth this question, but I perhaps didn't frame it correctly. So I'll frame it in two ways to you and you can answer it both. For people listening that want to be living on a Bitcoin standard and designating more of their time to the Bitcoin standard, the first part of the question is, how can they actually do that in practicality of giving more to Bitcoin? And then the second part is, when it comes to actually living on a Bitcoin standard and interacting with the world day to day with Bitcoin as money, what can people start doing to be living that life as well?
Well, the first thing is ask to be paid in Bitcoin, whatever you do, if you can, when, if at all possible. 2, try to interact all of your trade with people that will take Bitcoin. So if you have the option to get coffee at 6 or 7 places, or to buy your groceries at 6 or 7 places, if there's the same person that washes your car or cuts your grass or cleans your house, whatever it is, convince them to take Bitcoin. And you can give them an incentive for doing so, where you show them the price and you're like, look, I'm going to actually just give you a little bit more this time. Blah, blah, blah. You can do it however you want. For me, it's been an orange pilling experience, because I've taught people about Bitcoin. They get excited about it. Of course, when they first get it for their first payment, maybe they're getting, $50 worth of Bitcoin or whatever. They're like, well, how do I spend this? how do I convert this to real money? And that's when you get to continue educating. You're like, well, that is money. And in fact, convince your friend they go out to dinner and they buy you a $20 hamburger. You say, here's $20 worth of Bitcoin. You convince them. And so it becomes like a virus. So one, I try to receive Bitcoin when possible. I try to spend Bitcoin when possible. And if not, I have cards that will convert to Bitcoin for the vendors. And if the vendors will accept it, like they're at a Block or Square terminal, one of Jack Dorsey's companies, they can immediately take Bitcoin, and I show them how they can reduce the 2 to 3% transaction fee and just accept Bitcoin. If they need to pay their employees or payroll, they can click a button, no fee, and they can convert it to their currency, to US dollars out here. And for my bills that are all on auto pay, I pay in Bitcoin via Strike. And you can do that with Fold. You can do that with all kinds of apps, and Cash App is going to start doing that. And so, for my mortgage, for my utility bills, all of my monthly, my insurance, it all goes straight out of Strike, and it converts right when I have it set to out of Bitcoin. So I'm spending satoshis every time I can. So sometimes someone might say, well, if you're just doing that and they're just converting it to USD on their end, you're not really giving the recipient Bitcoin. Well, that's true. But by spending satoshis, I help lubricate the miners. They continue to get fees. There continues to be more transactions. And I just feel like there's more touch points. And even personally, outside of that, a lot of people know this about me because I'm talk incessantly about it. They're probably sick of it. But, I always give people 12 words as gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. And if I owe somebody money, I give them 12 words. Christmas, birthdays, whatever, it doesn't matter, Secret Santas, they get 12 words. And they're like, here's 12 words. They pop it in their phone. That's Bitcoin. Well, I have the 12 words. You have the 12 words. By the way, I have your Bitcoin because I gave you those 12 words. So you don't want me to take your Bitcoin, create your own 12 words. And, they can do it with any one of 100 different apps on their phone. I don't care if they start off with a hot wallet. It's fine. Boop. They push it. There's their 12 words. Great. Send, receive. They just did their first transaction. Well, then they ask that same question, Finn. They're like, well, this is great, but how do I convert it into real money? I'm like, that is real money. Next time we go out for a beer, I'm going to buy you your 2 beers. You will pay me in satoshis. Oh, it sounds like free money to them. So I just think once people have Bitcoin and then once they spend it, they start to interact with it. And again, this is a great theme because it ties into what we've been talking about. Once they see money the way they view money, which is currency, it starts to click in to them. Just the whole savings thing and the more, like privileged suit coiner thing, which I get and I'm part of, like, hey, yes, I want to save the majority of my wealth. I mean, for me, it's all of my wealth in Bitcoin. I get all that. But some of these normies are like, that's just overwhelming. And why would I put so much money in? But when they start to see it like they view Venmo or PayPal, I think that's the game changer, at least at the retail level.
Yeah, I absolutely love that approach that you're doing. I did the same thing about 2 months ago with my brother. He edited a video, one of the podcasts for me, and I got on a call with him and I got him to set up a wallet on his phone, give me the address, and I paid him in Bitcoin. And I said, if you want to work out how to use this thing, I'm here for you, but I want you to go and find it out. Because his first question was, how do I sell it for fiat? And he's still not done anything with it, but it's sitting there and he's watching it, and he is now asking questions about Bitcoin after a long time of just completely neglecting it. So I think that's an awesome way. And then the 12 words that you were talking about as well is another way to just encourage people to look into it and get more of an understanding.
The 12 words I think are so magical because when you give 12 words to someone and, let's say they bought dinner and you're like, great, here's $100 because you bought my dinner. I like to be able to text them in like 2 months' time and be like, hey, I'm looking at the 12 words I gave you. It's still there. I can take it back. You need to move that to your own wallet. And then they're like, oh, what? How do I do that? So I just like that. Now, I unfortunately have some people who I've given that, like, no joke, 3-4 years ago, and I'm still monitoring and looking at their 12-word wallet. And at a certain point, I'm going to say, I'm just going to take it back because apparently you don't want it. So I'll just regift it.
Yeah. No, I think that's an awesome way of naturally orange pilling, I think, and making it much more normalized as well as a transition as time goes on. So keeping this conversation going, what mistakes do you see that Bitcoiners make when conveying Bitcoin and trying to orange pill other people that they can potentially actually get better at to be more efficient?
So I think Bitcoiners forget the steps that they took to understand Bitcoin. And so because they've gone so far down the rabbit hole and now they understand it at a level where they get wallets and multi-sig and nodes and time locking and mining, and they're just so deep, and they've avoided all of the scams and the FUD and all the criticism, that they don't allow the people to organically come in and experience it the way we did. And so, when many of us came in, we didn't know what we know. Like, we had to learn it on our own. We had to be curious. And I think it's the curiosity levels that keep people hardened and keep them and make them true Bitcoiners. And so, we all go through these sort of trials and these ordeals, these tribulations that we have to fight. Sometimes they're external, like it's a scam or it's NFTs or it's something that is distracting us. But other times it's more internal. It's like it's your relationship and identity with Bitcoin. Like, how is Bitcoin really changing you? How is it making you see the world in a different light? How is it helping you to show up in a different way? And we get there, and then some normie, you have to remember, they just still, they have their job, they have their, trading app, and they're looking at NVIDIA and Tesla stock, and they're still thinking in dollar terms. And so we try to get too philosophical or too spiritual, and we lose the plot on what they need to just first focus on. And we jump to things that sound too technical and too complicated.
And with regards to mainstream adoption, I'm curious what your thoughts are on increasing the adoption of Bitcoin in the world throughout the globe, and then what, in your opinion, that timeline looks like and what needs to improve for that to end up playing out.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the adoption that matters for why Bitcoin was created and what it can do for people, I think that comes with pain, unfortunately. And we are seeing globally a lot more pain. We're reaching time periods where inflation can only go so far. So certain areas of the world are adopting much, much faster than like we are here in the U.S. I mean, I think a lot of people in the United States aren't feeling the pain as much, but they're starting to wake up. There's these points of, the Canadian truckers or COVID or Venezuela or Iran or banks just debanking you. I have several friends and people on my show that have gotten debanked. So I think it's going to take some pain. I think also, I have a lot of friends that are in a younger generation than me, or younger generations than me. And, when they do the math and they're not stupid and they're working their butt off, they don't see how they're going to own a home. And on one hand, I don't know that needs to be the goal or should be the goal anymore, but it saddens me to think, I'm Generation X, and it was very hard for us too. It wasn't as easy as the boomers. We had to work, but when I think about how much we had to work compared to what, the millennials and then the Gen Z, it's like, and keep going down. It's nuts. So I think the adoption's going to come with pain. Now, because it's a neutral and politically agnostic tool, all of the greed is going to find it. And that's partially why people like you, Finn, and myself are trying to educate so much, because I feel like we're all trying to tell people, look, you all have a chance. This is very egalitarian. We all have equal opportunity here, but there isn't going to be equal outcome. And when all of Wall Street and all of the big governments and everyone starts piling in, and it will happen, the price in fiat is just going to skyrocket. And that's okay. It'll always still be available for you because people are going to continue to sell out of it because it will benefit them and they still see it as a trade. And so, we have our ups and downs, and there's going to be time periods for you to come in. But the earlier the better, certainly. And just like, the internet or the iPhone or anything else, if there was an iPhone coin, if there was an internet coin, and he said, hey, the earlier you got in, the more valuable that coin would be. Wouldn't you want that coin? That's kind of how I look at it. And I think it's one reason people miss Bitcoin is because when they first hear about Bitcoin, they just think of the coin. They don't realize that Bitcoin, its main thing is a system, just like the internet. It's a system. And if people would view it as a system and be like, I can save by the growth and the value of this system. So I've seen charts, I don't know how accurate they are, but I've seen charts where the adoption is going quicker than the iPhone and is going quicker than the internet. So that's promising to me. But, that still took time. I don't know, maybe it's going to take another COVID. I don't know that people can handle another worldwide COVID. And I think it's going to take something like that for everyone to say, enough is enough. Because this is a better way. We intellectually know it is, and that's why we're trying to educate. We're trying to provide more portals and more doorways for people to walk into this special world that we've visited. And, I feel like we're coming back from Avatar. Like we went in there and now we're stepping back out and we're like, guys, there's this magical, beautiful place. You need to come join us. It's fantastic. And they're just like, what? That sounds crazy. You're in fantasy land. But that's how it feels sometimes.
I completely agree. And the frustrating bits are that one, often it sounds too good to be true. And then the other one, getting carried away with being passionate because you want to help these people, and they always think that there's an agenda of why you're trying to help and enlighten them to this new world. It's frustrating at times, but I think you've summarized it really well there. And one thing you mentioned around struggling to buy a house, that's actually one of the main things that got me into Bitcoin in the first place, because I was having these thoughts of, how am I even going to save for a deposit? And that led me to be asking different questions, looking at different vehicles, which luckily led me to Bitcoin. And initially, even when I first found Bitcoin, it was, okay, I'm going to save or invest in Bitcoin and then sell to get a deposit for my house. And then obviously, as you go down the rabbit holes, you realize, is that actually the best idea?
That's right.
But for my generation and why I'm passionate about it and why I started the podcast in the first place, like you've said, is to educate them on this new world, because not only have they got Bitcoin on their side, they've got time, which, as we know with Bitcoin, is so, so powerful. And I always ask this question, except the last 2 episodes I forgot, and I want to go back to it because it was initially a podcast for helping Gen Z understand money and Bitcoin. If you were Gen Z today, what would you be doing incorporating Bitcoin in your strategy to be getting ahead and protecting yourself into the future that's coming?
I mean, I'd find out what it is that I really enjoy doing where I can make decent amount of fiat, and I would get all of it into Bitcoin. I know it sounds simple, but it's that. And it does mean to delay gratification and be responsible and not necessarily be going to every single music festival or buying the fancy car or all the fancy brunches. And I get it. I get the experiences. And, when you're in a nihilistic, hopeless world and you're like, I can't get ahead, let me just enjoy my weekends and drink with my friends. But, it's like I went through the same thing when I was the age of Gen Z. I was at the hardware stores on Fridays and Saturday nights. I wasn't running around partying. I was driving an old beater car that my dad gave me. And because I was like, I need to learn and figure out real estate. And I owned several homes before any of my friends were even close to ever owning a home. Even though my generation, it's much easier to get a home, it was still tough. And so I would just say grind as much as you can while you're young, because with Bitcoin, the earlier you get in, the better. You are going to have more of an asymmetric opportunity and compounding with Bitcoin. I wish I had at the time, we had housing, but housing was sort of all over the place and you didn't know, and every house is so different and every neighborhood is so different. But if I knew that I could have Bitcoin back then, I know I would have stuck out and made more money doing things that I was just like, I don't know, it felt a little privileged. Like, I'd rather go do this. I'll make a little bit less money. Who cares? But, for a Gen Z, I would just be like, what can you do? And I also feel it could be something that I wouldn't want to do. The Gen X, we were, sort of taught by our parents, who were the boomers, that we had to be doctors and lawyers and go to college and all this stuff. And, now AI is going to wipe out a lot of that stuff. And it's like, man, I would just, I would paint, I would, wash driveways, wash windows. I would do all the things. I would solve a problem and do the things that my neighbors don't want to do. Just get as much Bitcoin as I can. And then you could chill out after a while and start that business you want to start out, but you at least have a nice base. Because that to me is, hope outside of, fiat currency. Clearly life is short. You have to enjoy the process. You can't just work for an outcome that may never happen. So you got to find I don't want to get too woo-woo, but, you got to find your purpose. You got to see what really feeds you. And I think that Gen Z has an opportunity in that you can sort of go back to the analog things that your parents were like, no, you don't want to go do that. You don't want to go cut someone's grass. You don't want to cut their trees. It's like, maybe I do. I don't know that anytime soon AI is going to be able to do that. Maybe there's going to be a robot that climbs up the tree, but I feel that'll be a while.
It's a super interesting topic of conversation that would probably lead us down a rabbit hole that we need a separate podcast episode for. But the one thing, or the two things that I do really worry about for my generation are, A, they're not listening or paying attention to Bitcoin, but so many are not paying attention to what the effects of AI are going to bring. I was fortunate that I used rugby as a scapegoat to avoid going to university and getting into all that debt. But I'm just seeing so many of my age group that went to university haven't even been able to get a job with that degree that they got, let alone moving forwards. And then all of the people now that are leading into university or in university, and they're going to come out and these jobs are just going to get absolutely decimated. And I think even in the last month with Claudebot, we've seen how quickly it's almost the suddenly moment, I think, where a lot of these jobs are going to go. That being said, if you can stack skills, stack sats, and leverage AI, I don't think there's been a better opportunity for people to get ahead with things like that. I don't know where I'm going with that point. I just wanted to kind of follow along with you. But one thing I do want to ask for your perspective on is, I've had pushback before when comparing Bitcoin to real estate, because people come back and say, yeah, but you can leverage or you can use leverage with real estate to get ahead. What are your thoughts for someone that is perhaps being encouraged to get their foot on the property ladder and start their real estate journey because they can use leverage to build up their portfolio perhaps, as opposed to just concentrating on Bitcoin?
Well, when you run the actual numbers of real estate, and remember your time is money, so keep in mind all of the maintenance, all the deterioration, all of the friction that it takes to run real estate, so flipping out tenants, trying to get a sale, the commissions, the brokers, the taxes. On paper, you make way less in real estate than everyone tells you do, than all the little courses and TikTok videos tell you that you make in real estate. That's the actual truth. Whether you're a landlord and you have to, bring in new people all the time, and then you have to rekey the place and paint and recarpet, and you have all the liability insurance, and, people put, holes through the walls, or whether you're, running Airbnbs and, you have your liability insurance, or the pool pump goes out, the AC blows up. And, I've had Airbnbs where something wasn't going right. I've had to then put them in a hotel. Well, now I'm suddenly paying for their vacation, right? Because you don't want a bad rating. And even with flipping the houses, just all the fees. And so unless you are really good at it, unless those are your skills and you like to do it, like I liked to do it, I ended up liking it. But unless you're good at that, like if you're hiring it out for people to actually rehab your place and renovate your place, and if you're hiring managers to manage your rentals and all that, you're really down to 5 or 6% a year. After all of that, that's the big surprise. It really is not nearly as much as you think. And if you're trying to get real estate to leverage, well, even though it may not sound like a good idea, you can also leverage your Bitcoin, right? It's just property. You can always leverage property. So whether it's a house or your Bitcoin, whether you think you should leverage or not, it's still the same thing. I would say that, if people are interested in, so here's the best hack. Well, so what part of the world do you live in?
I'm in Australia at the moment, but I'm from the
Australia.
UK.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't know if it's the same as you, but so here in the United States, if you buy a home and live in a home, you can then sell it tax-free for up to $250,000 in capital gains, or if you're married, $500,000. That is the one hack that did start my journey, because I was willing to just buy the dumpiest stupid house. I mean, the roof was like half off. Like, I didn't care. I'd sleep in a sleeping bag, whatever. Like, I could see studs, everything, pipes. I didn't care. And I just chipped away over the weekends for 2 years fixing it, and then I flipped it. And then all the profit I made on it was tax-free because it was within that $250,000. If it's over, you just pay taxes on the amount over. And you can do that every 2 years. And so by the clock, that became my second hustle outside of producing movies. I was just doing movies at the time. So I sold 2 years. I sold 2 years. I sold 2 years. And that was a lot of money. And that was also a lot of money back then. So that was kind of a hack because you need a place to live anyway. So I would say if someone wanted to do real estate, that could be something that they could think about. And it could be a small condo. It could be a flat, a loft, whatever. The ugliest, dilapidated, grossest place, because if you're willing to endure it, and, we Bitcoiners, we don't want chairs anyway, just you can fix that up and flip it. Now, I don't know what the tax rules are over there, so you guys may not have that same benefit, but there's always, it's really, really hard to compete with the person who's willing to live in a place that, the typical little couple with a young baby doesn't want to move in and just is aesthetically ugly. If you can get just a cosmetic fixer, that's always a fantastic way. But I don't think anyone trying to get a rental and having tenants and all that, it's just bad. And there's just so much risk. And nowadays people squat, and then there's legal, I've had people sitting in a place for 9 months before I could even kick them out. You just lose all kinds of money because you still have to pay the mortgage on it. So I'm not big and, bullish on real estate for those reasons. But, if you told me it was a game and I had to go buy real estate, what would I do? That's one thing I would think about.
Yeah. And to close up then, I guess the last question, or to hear your thoughts on the real estate property dream in the UK, Australia, and the US.
It's nuts.
Is crazy. But that comes from years and years of education and maybe engineering and indoctrination. So moving forwards into this Bitcoin future, what role do people like you and I have in shaping the narrative and helping people see that better? What do you see that looking like to improve the adoption and education around Bitcoin's future?
Do you mean in relationship to real estate, or?
I guess helping the people, or it's obviously the majority of people that see real estate as the number one to actually
I see.
Ask better questions.
Yeah, I think it's just so like I talked to lots of real estate groups, and I've been to real estate conferences and and talk about this, and I enjoy talking about this. And in general, it's getting them to first of all admit that for the most part they own real estate due to it being a flex or a brag. They like to tell people they own this property here, that have a property over there. But if they're not really using it, it's really just a balance sheet. And they have to admit that, first of all. And then two, they have to realize that the real estate isn't really going up in value, right? Your dollar or your pound or whatever is just losing value. And so you think you're making money, but can you really buy more after you've sold that place or flipped that place? Are you able to buy more than when you started that place? And then price in your time for that. So, the dollar doesn't have cash flow. People are always like, oh, well, Bitcoin doesn't have cash flow. Well, the dollar doesn't have cash flow. Gold doesn't have cash flow, right? You have to go try to take risk and do something with it. And real estate is risky. Now, I do believe that people need to separate sort of a lifestyle investment from just your regular investments. If a house or something is going to bring value to your family, and you really want to own a house for those reasons because you are worried that your landlord's going to kick you out and you're going to have to move again every 12 months or whatever, I get that. But you have to reconcile with yourself that you're never, ever, in Bitcoin terms, ever going to do as well as simply just having Bitcoin, which is peaceful and passive. Real estate just has so much risk, and you don't really own it. Your landlord is really the county in which you live in because they are collecting property taxes. It's really like I guess you guys might have this in Australia, I don't know, but it's almost like an unrealized capital gains tax because you haven't sold the place and you're just constantly being taxed every year. Most real estate people don't care when you tell them, look, you guys are raising the monetary premium on real estate. The utility value of real estate should be so much less, right? It's a bunch of boards and nails. It's wood and nails and cement. And you guys are raising the value because you're storing your money there. And you guys are buying houses that you don't even live in. And so you're making it more expensive for the people that just need a place to live. Most of them don't care. I mean, as much as we like that, they're like, I don't care. I just want to make money. It's like, okay, well, if you just want to make money, let's put up your real estate against Bitcoin, and let's look and see what they do. Real estate can't, and again, unless they're a professional and they really know what they're doing and they know their market, you can't beat it. You can't beat it with REITs or with indexes or just passively. And if you just have a manager, and a broker and a lawyer and people just handling stuff for you, or you're hiring someone to fix your house, to flip it, there's almost no money there.
It's a great way to end the conversation that hopefully leaves people to ask some questions and think critically about the two different ones. We could go down many further rabbit holes with that topic, so perhaps we'll have to do another episode at some point into the future. What I do want to do is just quickly hand the mic over to you, Terence, and if you can let people know where they can find you, your book, and then if there's any closing messages that you'd like to leave.
Sure. I'm mostly on X. I'm just Proof of Money, and people can find me there. They can DM me there. I'm part of a show called Bitcoin Today. We run for at least 2 hours, Monday through Friday every morning, and we talk about all the day's news and some macro geopolitics, all things Bitcoin. Anything that people are thinking about is on their mind. Knots Core, BIP 110, Quantum FUD, Jeffrey Epstein. You name it. We cover all of the stuff, and it's open to everybody. I'm also over at the Bitcoin Advisor, as you probably know, with Peter Dunworth and the gang. And I just really want to always teach and help people get into self-custody. And that's really it. Just say hello to me on X if you're around, or if you're going at the Bitcoin conference, I'll see you guys out there. I'll be speaking there in Vegas, and I'll be in Portland emceeing the Bitcoin is for Everyone conference. So that's a nice, fun one too, if people are over there.
Awesome. Well, I'll leave all of that in the show notes below so people can check you out, and I'll put your book in there as well. Terence, thanks so much for jumping on. Hopefully we can do another one in the future and go down some more rabbit holes. And guys, we'll see you on the next one.